Welcome to Trekkie Tuesday. Today we are talking about Friday's Child. This episode was weird. All Star Trek episodes are a little weird, but this one was like a little out of order or something. While we were watching it, I kept saying, this doesn't make any sense. They keep jumping from scene to scene without any transitions, without any explanation. I suspect that the script was not originally written for this episode. And we looked into it, and I was totally right. What do you mean, total? No?
Well,
the original script was... Okay. I wasn't totally right, but the original script was apparently changed by Gene Roddenberry. Roddenberry? What's his name? Roddenberry.
Which probably comes from Rottenberry.
It's a bad last name.
Kirk, Spock, and McCoy are stuck on a planet that McCoy has inexplicably been sent down to do the initial diplomatic recon to, and they need to talk to them because they want to continue their mining treaty that they have with them, but the Klingons, who they continue to be having a Cold War with, are now also trying to come in and sign their own mining treaty with them, and they don't want that because of the whole Cold War thing.
One thing I really liked about this episode in the beginning was how they focused... I think the whole episode in general kind of focused on how difficult it is to sort of communicate between cultures, and how difficult it will be when there will be other planets with other species that value different things. And how even, I liked how the aliens in this episode, they spoke English, but you didn't totally understand what their goals were or what their value system was.
Yeah.
And even within a language, it can be difficult to communicate and see eye to eye, which I think is like the reality between cultures on Earth, and is the reality, I think, if we ever meet up with some intelligent life, will be just how challenging it will be to show that we both want to do something together without conflict getting in the way, and really finding common ground will be really challenging, or potentially could be anyway. I think the idea that we're going to be able to say we come in peace and agree what peace means is hard to explain. I just think communication is going to be really challenging, and I think that is always the case. And I think the idea that you could value different things is something that hasn't really come up that much. I guess we see Spock values logic above all else, but the general framework is, the idea that there's, I think, what is rational, all of these things are still common to humans. They're not so far off. And here we sort of see a totally different value system in terms of a lot of things, and it's not even clear what the motivations of this species are that we're encountering a lot of the time throughout much of the episode. So that, I think, was good. Some bad things that happened in this episode include Spock was fine. McCoy hitting a woman to get her to listen to him, and she's pregnant, and I don't know, some weird stuff going on with McCoy in this episode where you're just whoa, what is wrong with you? I don't know. Maybe you want to take it from here. That's kind of all I had to say. Oh, and the outfits were really funny in this episode. That's about it.
The most notable thing in that, aside from the high alien quotient of the aliens relative to normal Star Trek anyway, they're still far less alien than an actual alien culture would be, but I assume. But is the female character. So apparently, we just did brief research on this to try to look into Sarah's hypothesis. This was written by a woman, Dorothy Fontana, and the idea was to show this female character as somebody who was struggling against a patriarchal culture that said the only meaningful role she could have was as a mother, and she didn't want that, and the episode was going to end with her sacrificing her child's life to save her own. And Gene Roddenberry intervened and rewrote it so that it was about a woman who doesn't want who initially doesn't see the idea of being a mother as valuable and wants to honor her traditional role in society, but in a way that doesn't involve being a mother. And McCoy slaps and bullies her into acknowledging that she's supposed to be a mother.
It was so weird that I don't understand.
Spock, who is often the voice of often ends up being the voice of the 21st century viewer somehow in this situation, just wanders over while this whole thing is going on, and
he literally has a frown on his face.
Yes.
But he doesn't say anything, and Kirk even is at one point just kind of McCoy, what's the dealio here? He doesn't say that, but something like that. It just doesn't.
The episode starts off with, I think, 4 people beaming down, one of whom is wearing a red shirt. And by this point, we've watched that we really know exactly what's coming. The red shirt does not make it to the opening credits. Poor red shirt. Everybody else in Starfleet survives the episode. The Klingon dies for no particular reason. It's really not clear whose side, what the Klingon's motivations. I feel like we're supposed to understand, but he randomly seems to switch between trying to work with the natives and just killing them off opportunistically, and eventually gets into a firefight and gets killed.
I feel like all of the fight sequences in this episode were very sudden and not explained. You would just be watching and it seemed like diplomacy, then they would cut to them being on the Enterprise and dealing with whatever the Enterprise ship was going on with Scotty, and then they would go back to the planet and all of a sudden everyone's fighting and you're like, what are they fighting about? What happened? And it didn't really make any sense. I mean, to some degree I kind of liked that because it was that's kind of how it would be. You wouldn't totally understand what was going on or why people would be fighting. I think that is somewhat realistic, but it definitely was not your normal episode of Star Trek where you know what's going to happen practically right in the beginning almost, and it's very it's very clear. There's one plot, one thing going on, you kind of get it. It's about one theme, and it's very, clear story arc. This I didn't know. I was where are, what? And then eventually I just kind of stopped paying attention and I was very confused. But
yeah, I kept paying attention but remained confused. Did not know where they were going with this. And was kind of surprised at the end when the mom decides to keep the baby. Kind of seemed like it was going to end up being McCoy's baby somehow, although obviously they can't make that kind of radical change to the plot. I was a little worried it was going to end with McCoy having a baby, and then later episodes would never mention this again, especially since this was clearly filmed before a lot of the episodes we've been watching. Chekhov still got the wig instead of the natural monkey's hair, and Sulu is there when in the later episodes George Takei is taken half the season off to go do something else that did not turn out to be his career building as Star Trek. So he came back. The outdoor scenes are really awkwardly dubbed with no silence in between the lines in some scenes. It's very obviously clipped dubbed dialogue, although that sort of makes it seem less stagey and more realistic that everybody's talking very quickly because they are in a firefight and maybe you should talk quickly in that situation. Then later on they go back to little scenes where Spock and Kirk are calling to each other because they're worried that they're hurting. Spock, Jim, I'm okay. there are people shooting at you, don't shout and wave. To use their communicators as sonic screwdrivers to cause an avalanche, which looks suspiciously like an explosion, because I'm guessing that was an easier thing for them to accomplish in real life.
I think it had a really good I'm a doctor, not a line, which was I'm a doctor, not an escalator, which I think was like a really good one. Like, out of all the I'm a doctor, not a blah blah blah, escalator was pretty good. Pretty good.
Like that. Yeah. The context of that is messed up as all get out.
Oh yeah, don't even look. Don't watch it because it's horrifying.
The Klingons, or as they are frequently referred to in this episode, Klingons.
But they had a hard G. It was
Klingons.
Like Klingons or something. It's weird. They don't know how to pronounce it yet, which is fair because they look totally like humans.
So the Klingons continue to get a little developed. It's interesting. We don't get a clear picture of their culture, because whenever we see them, they're like the foils to a different alien culture. What is Friday's Child? Friday's Child is kind?
Fair and loving, or some kind?
Monday's Child is fair
and warm.
face. Loving and Friday's Child. That doesn't make any sense. There's a child in it. They picked a day of the week at random. Maybe Friday, like Robinson Crusoe. Tune in next week for the deadly years. Sometimes the enemy is not a Klingon. Sometimes the enemy is time. There is some realism there. I think the Australian Aborigines had like centuries to millennia of using throwing knives and never inventing the bow, and then somebody showed them the bow and they were like, whoa, this is so much better. So it can happen. But even if you're into weapons, you don't come up with the bow.